Hello, guys. This is something completely different. I've never done this before, but I wanted to try something new, and I've been feeling very experimental with my life as of late. And I know I've always done a lot of things in my life, trying out new hobbies and such, but I've been doing a lot of reflecting recently, mainly because I'm turning 28 in a couple days, and I've been really reflecting on how my life is currently going at the moment and what I'm doing, what direction I'm taking. I'm diving even deeper into my late 20s, and it seems like I have no coherence in my life whatsoever. So I read this article actually lately that kind of sort of changed my life in a really, really big way, mostly because I feel like I've always had this frustration with myself where I want to do so many things and I can't seem to choose just one. I can't seem to just stick with one and, you know, move on from there. But I read this article on Substack called Be More Confusing, actually, by Michelle Lipsitz. And this is how I came to kind of birthing the idea of making this video in the first place, because maybe somebody out there just needs to hear this, or maybe I just need to say this out loud to whoever is willing to listen. So obviously I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I will link it in the description down below, but I just want to read excerpts, and this is basically kind of the tree that holds all the branches, or maybe the root of this whole video, and I'm just going to, grow and stem little snippets of thoughts from this essay. So, Be More Confusing, actually, by Michelle Lipsitz. She says, "The death of charisma is predictability. Charismatic and magnetic people are confusing. They've got edges. Beautiful, fascinating, craggy edges that give people something to hold on to. The kind of edges that snag people's attention like a ring catching on a sweater. They start a podcast about medieval brewing techniques while learning to code so they can personally figure out how to replace the mouse on their website with a tiny sparkly firework. No. They get really into collecting vintage toasters for 3 months and then pivot to teaching themselves classical Greek. They have passions that absolutely make no sense together, and that's exactly what makes them captivating." This is a problem I really used to always think, or a problem that I thought I always had, was that, like, especially when people ask me, "Sophia, what is it that you really do in your life?" There are so many things that I share about my life, especially online, especially to my friends. I'm the type of person that when I love something, I really like kind of like throwing it at people, which can be a good or a bad thing, but that's just, I guess, how my love language goes. I love sharing things that I love with other people because I feel like other people would also like them, or especially if I have friends who I think of when I do something, I always think of, oh, this person will like this, oh, my sister will love this, oh, my dad will love this. So because of this, people always ask me, like, there are so many things that you're doing in your life, and what is it that you like, what are you actually really doing? Because I've been asked this so many times, I think I've always had this akala ko, may kailangan akong isang gagawin. I always thought I had to do this one thing for the rest of my life, because that's how you choose, or that's how we were taught to choose careers or vocations or, future jobs. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's not always, what are the things you want to do when you grow up? You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference. And it's always also the comment of, "Be, ang dami mong time." I hear this all the time, guys, about how it seems like I have never ending time to other people, which is so not the case. I am actually in a scarcity of time, but that's an issue for a different conversation. I confuse myself too sometimes. And for the longest time, I've always thought of this as a negative thing, because you know how that saying, jack of all trades, master of none. And I've always thought of this as something negative. But I remember my best friend Theola, who is also like me, who wants to do all of these other things and have so many projects in her life, always reminds me that that quote doesn't actually end there. It's actually jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than the master of one. Sorry, I had to stop for a moment there because it was suddenly raining super loud, and now I'm back. And I hope that I finished this video pod. Teka, parang may laway sa mic. Sorry. I don't know if you heard that, but whatever. For me, I feel like wanting or liking to do things isn't necessarily the same as being good at them. You can like things, but you can also not be the biggest expert in doing them. If you're a little bit like me, who feels remotely like a little bit confused with your life, or, you know, there's just so many things you want to do, not necessarily accomplish, but so many things you want to try out in your life, I'm here for you. And, you know, this is why I'm making this video. It's really just to reach out to people that are feeling the same way or in the same pickle. Or did I just burp on the mic? Sorry, was that heard? Anyway, if you're like me, high five. Also, I just want to say, as a disclaimer, this is not, I'm not like other girls, cry for help. It actually is quite the opposite, I think, now that I think about it. It's more of like a human experience thing. Humans want different things. Humans are not meant to do one thing forever, their whole lives. And this is something that Michelle Lipsitz talks about in her essay. She says, real humans are weird and contradictory. They have random obsessions that don't fit their brand. They go through phases. They abandon hobbies and pick them back up years later. They contain multitudes, and those multitudes don't need to have a coherent narrative thread. Projects let you be gloriously nonlinear. You don't have to turn every interest into a side hustle or your entire personality. You can just have a woodworking project, and a Bollywood project, and a project to learn all the words to Nicki Minaj's verse in Monster. None of these things need to make sense together. They don't need to serve your personal brand or your 5-year plan. This is actually your greatest asset. The most interesting insights, the most compelling art, the most innovative solutions come from connecting dots that don't obviously go together. This part of the essay dives into leading project-based lives. And I actually came across this essay through a different person or a different form of media. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Wild Geese by Anne Howard. If you haven't listened to her, please. A big part of me actually birthing the idea of actually making this video in sort of a video podcast style is because of Anne. She is one of my greatest inspirations. And in one of the episodes of her podcast, sorry, I kind of disappeared into my mind there. Anyway, in one of her episodes in Wild Geese called Be More Confusing, actually, Anne was how I came across Michelle Lipsitz. I remember Anne talking about it in the pod that people who live project-based lives or who treat life as a series of different projects and not just this one linear thing are people who lead life or who live life with love, with the direction of love and passion. And these types of people who lead these project-based lives actually are the most captivating people you will ever meet. If you remember someone who was just so captivating to you, somebody who mystified you, someone who truly inspired you, think about it. They're probably the type of people who are doing lots of little things, either at the same time or at different points in their lives, and they're not the same person every year, every few years, every 10 years. They change, they evolve, they grow, because that's how humans are supposed to be. We're supposed to be evolving, growing, and forever expanding. I always get so excited when I see or hear friends and family talk about new little hobbies that they collect throughout the years. Like, when I hear friends who are suddenly taking dance classes, even if they've never danced before in their lives, some who are taking pottery, some who are starting a new YouTube channel. And, these things really bring out so much joy in so many people in my life. And there is no expectation of perfection with all of these ideas that are born inside our brains, these ideas that are inspired by experiences, inspired by circumstances, inspired by different people around us, because that's just who we are as people. We are slowly and intentionally collecting different inspirations and experiences from other people, from other places, other cultures, languages, movies, art, that we are a collection of so many things. And this is the art of only doing, only trying, and only living. This is how I want to live my life. This is how I want to slowly become as I fully am knee deep into my late 20s. This mind shift is really so helpful to me at this point in my life, because if I didn't come across this realization, I think I would constantly be on edge about finding myself, if whatever that means. Michelle says, so here's my proposal. Instead of setting goals that feel like homework assignments from a particularly uninspired life coach, start collecting projects like they're Pokemon cards. Let your interests cross-pollinate like they're at a honeybee rave. Consider this your official permission slip too. Have multiple unrelated projects running simultaneously. Refuse to pick a niche. Be impossible to elevator pitch. Make people work a little to figure you out. And lastly, have interests that make absolutely no sense together. I was not kidding when I said this article changed my life, because I truly feel like I'm in the most confusing era of my life. And I think this is something that will constantly be a theme forever. But for the longest time, especially in my early 20s, I thought I knew what I was going to do. I thought, okay, I like this, I'll do it. Oh, okay, wait, I like something else. Maybe I'll do it a little bit, but not as much as I have to do the main thing that I have to do. And then you keep discovering yourself over and over again, and then it gets you so frustrated to just stick to one. But that's the thing. I love this confusing era in my life, and I love having all of these things that I want to do, and I don't want to choose just one. So I won't, because where's the fun in that? A lot of this self-reflection definitely surfaced because it's my birthday this weekend, and there's something about birthdays and turning a year older that just makes you think about life and direction and where the next step will be for you, and how this age, how this year will turn out for you. And despite being knee deep into my late 20s, I think that honestly, I don't really fully feel like I'm in my late 20s, if that makes any sense. And, we can blame the pandemic for it. Like, I've always felt like the pandemic took years away from us. But on the other side of this, also think that despite the pandemic, or like even if it didn't happen, I feel like we as humans will always never feel or never fully know what it's like to be a certain age until we're past that certain age. Like, we're never going to feel like, oh, right now I'm 28, I feel like I'm 28. No, it's never like that. Like, it's just an experience that I've had, that I miss being a certain age that is already past me. And you feel the true essence of it after, when you've had all these memories of it and you've reflected, and you can look back at the pictures and the videos and just smile and be like, it was fun being 18. And by 18, I mean 23. 18 definitely wasn't so fun for me. Right now, though, I'm definitely in an era where there are a lot of things going on for me. And this is all by choice, because again, I'm in a very exploratory age or era in my life. And I feel like this exploratory time feels so essential to my individuality. It feels so essential to my growth and to finding contentment and happiness and just, feeling adventurous in life For the longest time, I've been trying to find this niche because I started this YouTube channel 9 years ago and I've tried to grow it. I've tried to put myself out there on the internet. All of the research that I've done into succeeding online is to niche yourself down. And this is how you create your own personal brand. By branding yourself, you are this one thing. So it's basically putting yourself in a box and saying, this is Sophia. She's a beauty vlogger, beauty content creator. And I remember I started my YouTube channel with makeup because I loved makeup. I love makeup gurus and beauty vloggers, and I wanted to be just like them. As the years progressed, especially when I was in college and then when I started working, I started traveling a lot with my family, and I was like, oh, this is a nice thing to document. So I moved to travel vlogging. I didn't really move, but I incorporate travel vlogs into my YouTube channel. And then during the pandemic, I started doing booktube and making book content. And it's just this confusing plethora of things that, people would be like, what is this channel even about? Why are there so many things happening at once, Sophia? And that's the thing. It really frustrated me that I had no one niche and I tried to stick to one, but it was just so hard to do this one thing because sometimes I don't feel like reading. Sometimes I don't feel like putting on makeup, and I don't all the time travel. It's been really hard to kind of figure out what my personal brand is. But in this era of self-actualization, I realized that branding myself isn't something I want to do and I'm so very interested in. I was talking to my friend Theola the other day about how she's having a hard time, niching herself down because there are so many things she wants to share online, but she can't find this one thing that will identify her. And this podcast that I was listening to, Wild Keys by Anne Howard, Anne talks about how it isn't necessary to niche, and the best thing you can do to compromise with a niche is to find a thread. So instead of a box, you find a thread that will tie everything together like a quilt. So imagine a quilt that has a quilt is essentially sewn up fabrics, or like different fabrics that are sewn together in different patterns. They are not the same whatsoever. Some do it in really neat squares. Some do it, in not so neat like cuts or textures. But I'm now thinking of making my life into this one big quilt where I just have this thread that will tie or sew everything together and will become this big Fifi quilt where I can showcase everything that I like to do in life and not have to choose one, which is such an amazing feeling and such a liberating mindset perspective or mindset shift to have in my life, because this is definitely something that I've been struggling with for a long, long time. You do not have to be a niche to be relevant. And if we're talking about personal branding and social media, although if it doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. But you don't need it to be relevant online. But then again, being relevant online is a whole other black hole in itself, which is a different topic. Or else we'll be here all day. Let's talk about careers, because this whole career thing is also kind of a pickle in the jar, right? So I work at a full-time 8 to 5 job every day from Mondays to Fridays, and I love my job. I am lucky because not a lot of people can say this. In fact, not the majority of people can say that they actually love their jobs. I know I'm truly blessed, and I know this is such a rare occurrence to have. But I also want to give credit to the people who are surrounding me in my workplace, to my bosses, to my colleagues. They make my job great and amazing. So it's not just the job itself, it's really the people that are involved. But I don't want to talk about my job. I kind of mentioned it because apart from my full-time job, my 8 to 5, I part-time as a makeup artist on the weekends. So I graduated beauty school in January. I also have a YouTube channel that, as inconsistently as I upload, I still do work on. I moonlight as a costume designer and stylist for production. So I do theater work also on the side. You know, the $1,000,000 questions for these to me always are, Fifi, how do you find the time to do all of these? Or why do you do all of these at the same time? And you know what? I just find time. I wouldn't call myself workaholic per se because I don't love labor. So everything that I actually am doing with my life is by choice, apart from, you know, having to earn money full time. And, you know, even though I love my job, you know, it's not a choice to have a full-time job. But I do love all of these little side quests that I have, and they are all by choice because these are all hobbies that turned into, you know, just things that I love doing all the time. Why is my camera blinking like that? So my battery died, and then my memory card was full. So I had to move files from my memory card, from my other extra memory card that I haven't cleared out from my last filming, to my SSD, which is very handy, by the way. If you don't have an SSD yet,
my boyfriend gives to me. It's the Samsung one, and it's 2 TB. If you don't have an SSD yet, it's so much better than a hard drive. It's a Type C, and it's so fast. It transfers fast, so fast. I always thought it didn't matter what type you had as long as you had storage, but I realized the type matters because even if it has a lot of storage, if it transfers really slow, then it's very inefficient for you.
Anyway, what was I saying? That around. There is this itch that cannot be scratched no matter what I do. Cannot be scratched by my full-time job. And not to be all like, oh, because I'm a creative, you know, because that sounds so pretentious. But, you know, there's these things that I just love to do and I like doing that cannot be found. It cannot be found in my full-time job, which is why I do part-time as a makeup artist, and I do YouTube on the side, and I do all of these creative pursuits on the side, even if it eats up all of my other free time. Because to me, like, my mindset is all of my other free time are for the things that I cannot do in my full-time. Yes, I do sometimes find myself losing time for rest or relaxation, which is something that I am continuously working on and trying to improve as I live my days, and as I grow as a person. And sometimes I wish I really had more hours in a day to fulfill or like to even do everything I want to do. But, you know, I'm a worm. I'm a worm. I like to wiggle my way into so many different things, try so many different things, discover, be inspired. And sometimes it's even to my detriment because there are so many things that I try to start or even get to start that I don't actually finish. So it's a double-edged sword. You know, you have to find a balance. There is a balance that has to be set. Because if you keep starting things or you keep starting projects that you don't end up finishing, a lot of the times it's you who suffer from, you know, the sayang. Ikaw yung sinasabi mo sa sarili mo, sayang, sana ginawa ko yun. Sayang, sana tinuloy ko. Sayang, sana tinapos ko. I wish I finished it. Because your projects or your ideas deserve to be realized. And this is something that I really, really appreciated and I learned a lot from in this book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. So she is the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And I've never read Eat, Pray, Love. But I think it was also my best friend Fiola who told me to read this book. And this book teaches you or tells you about creativity or living creatively beyond fear. Because so many people today were taught, especially in my generation, were taught that being a creative will get you nowhere. You know, it's not a practical job. It doesn't make money. It won't put food on the table. So people have been living creatively in fear because previous generations have taught us that this will not get us anywhere. And it's by no means their fault because this is what they were also taught, you know? So it's a cycle of things we need to unlearn about creativity. I highly, highly recommend this book to anybody who wants to live more creatively every day. You don't even have to be an artist to read this, but I just highly recommend this to anybody who wants to pursue more creative things and to get out of their shell or to find new ways to live. Because I understand that we most of us have full-time jobs or we have our main jobs every day, but we seek other things to do with our lives. And this is something that I really recommend for you to read or to touch into or to even look into, because it taught me so much. And I want to read an excerpt or talk about just multiple points that Elizabeth Gilbert touched into, especially about the idea that ideas, like the ideas that enter your brain, these are alive and almost sentient beings, almost having minds of their own. These ideas or these inspirations that come to you or just hit you, they seek you actually, and they choose you, in fact. And this was such a good way to change my mindset about inspiration, about ideas that I come across. Elizabeth Gilbert says that ideas are alive, that ideas do seek the most available human collaborator, that ideas do have a conscious will, that ideas do move from soul to soul, that ideas will always try to seek the swiftest and most efficient conduit from the earth, just as lightning does. This was such a humbling thing for me to hear and to read, because there are always these projects in my brain, or ideas even in my brain, that just appear. And, sometimes I try to do them. Sometimes I put them in my pocket, I write them on a notebook, or I just put them aside in my brain and say, okay, maybe. This is something that has frustrated me as of late because, the what ifs. There were so many things that I could have done with these ideas, but I ignored them, or I didn't finish them. I wasn't disciplined enough or committed enough to the bit to do it. And not that it's bad to not finish a project. Of course, if there are so many things at play when it comes to, living a project-based life, there's resources, there's time, there's mental energy, the current landscape or environment that you're in that could influence if you will pursue something or not. Of course, these are all things that you should consider. But there's also this conversation about ownership of an idea that Elizabeth Gilbert touches in her book. Okay, this is one of my favorite things in her book that I that really blew my socks off. When you get a really bright idea, you think about it, maybe like a story, and then you think about it, it's a great storyline, you write it down, tuck it in your pocket and say, I'll revisit it later. And then you end up not revisiting it, right? It ends up collecting dust in your notebook or in your head even, or in your notes app. And in 3 months, 5 months, a year, 10 years later, you find this story, you read it, and you're like, wait, I thought of that. Have you ever had that? Like, wait, I had this idea. I had this crazy idea, and I know it sounds insane, but I had this almost exact same idea years ago, or maybe yesterday. But apparently somebody else is also doing it. The amount of times that has happened to me so many times, whether it be a content idea or like an artwork or even a song. So many times I've always said to myself, when I hear or see something that is kind of familiar, I'm always like, wait, I think I actually thought about this before. I think it has crossed my brain. But you shrug it off as coincidence. And you're like, you know what? We might have had the same idea. And you just move on with your life, but you secretly hate yourself because you didn't pursue that idea, and that other person is actually really successful with what you thought of also, essentially. Elizabeth Gilbert also talks about that, and it's amazing the way she says it. This is how it comes to pass that one morning you open up the newspaper and discover that somebody else has written your book, or directed your play, or released your record, or produced your movie, or founded your business, or launched your restaurant, or patented your invention, or in any way whatsoever manifested some spark of inspiration that you'd had years ago, but never entirely cultivated or had never gotten around to finish. This may vex you, but it really shouldn't, because you didn't deliver. You didn't show up ready enough, or fast enough, or openly enough for the idea to take hold within you and complete itself. Therefore, the idea went hunting for a new partner, and somebody else got to make the thing. Somebody else got to make the thing. When I read this, I felt so humbled. I truly felt called out. Because how many times have I had so many business ideas, so many art ideas that I've had in my brain and said, I'll do that one day, but never did because I was too lazy or too insecure or, truth be told, too busy doom scrolling to ignore the idea knocking in my brain and literally asking me to realize it. Like I was chosen. I was literally chosen for this idea. And I said no. Or I ignored it. It's like God choosing Mary to be the mother of Jesus. And I said no. Like, the concept is beyond me. Elizabeth Gilbert continues to say, if inspiration is allowed to unexpectedly enter you, it is also allowed to unexpectedly exit you. Me in my head reading this is just thinking, sayang, sobrang sayang, Fifi, sayang, all the things I could have done in my early 20s if I just had the discipline, the self-respect, or even the respect for the idea in itself. If only I viewed ideas and inspirations like this. If only I read this book early on. I wish I treated my ideas with more grace, with more honor, and be like, thank you for choosing me. Wow. This is such a great opportunity. Just like getting a job, be like, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for choosing me to be your elite employee. Like, I am so honored. If I had this mindset in my early 20s, when I had all these bright ideas before, but just was too something. There's so many things. I had so many excuses back in the day, and I was just too all of them to even realize that I was chosen for all of these projects that I could have done in my life. And it's a big sigh. I mean, there's no use crying over spoiled milk. Alin ba dun? Spilled or spoiled. I also know that these ideas of mine, one way or another, that have left me or that I've ignored are now with people who deserve them. Worthy vessels, if you will, that will make sure they happen and will make sure they are done and completed. Which is also humbling. The book says there is no theft, there is no ownership, there is no tragedy, there is no problem. There is no time or space where inspiration comes from, and also no competition, no ego, no limitations. There is only the stubbornness of the idea itself, refusing to stop searching until it has found an equally stubborn collaborator, or multiple collaborators, as the case may be. Work with that stubbornness. Work with it as openly and trustingly and as diligently as you can. Work with all your heart, because I promise, Elizabeth promises, if you show up for your work day after day after day after day, you might just get lucky enough some random morning to burst right into bloom. In conclusion, okay, to sum all of this up, I don't know if I actually made a point. I think I made several, but I don't know if I cohesively threaded that like a quilt. I want to practice what I preach, so I hope I did some justice into what I wanted to say anyway. For the longest time, I think I mentioned this, but I've been frustrated with myself because I viewed all of these confusing elements that I had in me as baggage or as a negative thing because I felt like I had no direction in my life and I have no cohesiveness to my brand, if that makes any sense. But I'm not a brand. I'm not one thing, and I will explore as much as I can, and I will enjoy exploring and just doing all of these side quests in my life. And maybe maybe life is about the side quests we make along the way. Maybe that's how the statement should go. Let's just live our project-based lives. Let's lead with love and passion and a little bit of rational thinking, if you will, because you still need that in your life. And just be. Just do. I want to close this with a poem that I found on Instagram from a poet called Chandresh Bhardwaj, and I will link the poem down below. But if you want to stay for the whole thing, I will read it to you. It's not so long, but it's a poem. It's called "What If You Want to Be Too Many Things?" And this hit me in the heart, right in the middle of my chest. And it was a very cathartic experience to come across this poem. So if you need this and if somebody else out there needs this, this is for you. Who told you that wanting many things will make you lost? No one. Not really. It was your mind trying to protect you from uncertainty. It wanted a script, a box, something safe, something certain. But go back a little. When you were born, you were a blank canvas. Shuddha Chaitanya, pure consciousness. And then they painted you with their beliefs, fears, and incomplete stories. Your identity was never your own. It came from family, school, society, culture, and survival. Layer upon layer until your inner muse got lost under the noise. The mind loves what it knows, and what it knows is memory and imitation. That's why it says, pick one thing, play safe, be consistent. Because if you bloom in too many directions, it won't know how to hold you down. But you're not here to be held by the mind. You're here to hold yourself through reinvention, through mess. Tantra teaches you are not one thing. You are a river of many moods, a thunderstorm that can also be a playful poem, a lover, a seeker, an artist, a mystic, a leader. You don't have to pick. The way I see it, every 7 years, a sacred cycle renews. From birth to 7, you absorb. 7 to 14, you explore. 14 to 21, you rebel. And from 21 to 28, you make mistakes. God, I hope you do. From 28 to 35, the truth begins to wake you. What you thought was forever starts to fall apart. If you're paying attention, you start to bloom again, not as a fixed identity, but as a sacred experiment. So if you want to be many things, go for it. Be the entrepreneur who writes poetry, the lawyer who dances barefoot, the mother who paints stars on her ceiling. You're not scattered. You're reimagining and rewriting your existence. Whoever said your life was meant to cohesively make sense was wrong. Live your life out of a box. Go be free. Thank you for joining me here on this rainy evening. Well, it is now almost the evening, but I'm happy that you're here. Thank you for listening to me yap for almost half an hour. But I hope I made sense, and I hope you took something away from this one. Thank you so much for swimming by my channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!